Joining us now is our talkSPORT's football correspondent and somebody whose beat was the South Coast for many, many years, Alex Crook. Good evening, Alex.
Good evening.
Listen, thanks for joining us. You know the club, you know the people involved. I don't know what they were saying before this latest defeat, but to me, the start to the season and the first half against Spurs today means this was almost inevitable.
I think so, Danny. And actually, I was just checking through my emails there. We actually reported as far back as October the 2nd that the Southampton owner, Dragan Solak, had serious concerns about their start to the season. So what was that, 10 weeks ago now? They would argue that's more than enough time for Russell Martin to turn it around. I would counter that and say, actually, if you look at the Southampton squad, they're probably where they should be. I looked at the team that played Tottenham tonight. There isn't much Premier League quality there. If you take out young Tyler Dibbling, I think it's really a championship team trying to hold their own in the Premier League. I don't think the recruitment for several windows has been good enough, and ultimately that's come home to roost. I guess if you're making a case for dismissing Russell Martin, you would point out how stubborn he's been about his playing style, but he would argue that was the playing style that got them promoted from the Championship to the Premier League last season. Maybe at times they needed a plan B, but again, I'll come back to the recruitment not being good enough. It wasn't good enough when they were relegated first time round from the Premier League a couple of years ago, which I thought then was utterly preventable. So I don't think it's just Russell Martin who should come under the microscope. They've got Rasmus Ankersen, the sporting director, who's been in charge of a lot of that recruitment. And I know that Dragan Solak has concerns about him as well. So let's see what happens there. They're 9 points adrift of safety. They've taken 5 points so far this season. Whoever comes in, I think it's going to be a massive task now to try and keep them up. But a bit like Gary O'Neill, when the fans turn, they had turned in number. I think it's very difficult for any manager to survive.
I mean, Alex, is the major problem that they were sort of unexpectedly promoted? Is this what is the crux of it all?
Well, Dragan Solak is an ambitious person. He didn't buy the football club with the intention of getting them relegated to the Championship in the first place. So I think when they hired Russell Martin, they hoped that they would get back in the Premier League. I believe they set a sort of 5-year plan. So yeah, I guess you could argue that maybe that they overachieved last season with that playoff final win over Leeds. And maybe the expectation levels rise, certainly amongst the supporters, but probably with the owner as well. They would come into the Premier League and be competitive. They've struggled to do that. And when you're 5-0 down at home, it's a very difficult scenario for any manager to come and explain. Will they concede after 39 seconds in a game? Actually, foolishly, I thought they might get something from that. Probably said more about Spurs' recent form than Southampton's. But there's ways to lose it. Well, there's ways to lose in the Premier League, and that was obviously a very damaging defeat. But yeah, maybe he did overachieve last season. Maybe they could have done with it an extra year in the Championship to strengthen the squad, to bed into the way that he wants to play, and therefore maybe the step up to the Premier League wouldn't be so vast. But we're seeing it, aren't we? We saw it last season with all 3 promoted clubs being relegated. And you look at the table now this season, it's only Wolves, really, isn't it, who are saving that from happening again, because I think Southampton are down. Obviously, a magnificent victory for Ipswich yesterday, but I still expect them to go. Ruud van Nistelrooy had an initial uplift at Leicester. They got battered yesterday. So already at this early stage, I think there's probably only 4 teams in the relegation battle, because I think Palace are too good. I think Sean Dyche will grind out results at Everton. And it could be a very dangerous trend that we get into, where the teams coming up for the Championship aren't equipped. And then you're going to see promising young British managers like Russell Martin pay the price for their job.
And promising young British players who get the team promoted, then get stripped away from the club. I look at Archie Gray at Spurs because Leeds couldn't get promoted, and it's a cycle. It's no good, but Russell Martin's carrying the can here. But the club in their statement, and it's a long statement, talk about that gap between the Championship and the Premier League. But if they recognise that, then it's up to everybody, the management group, and I include the administrators as well as the football side. You either have to retool the squad, which Ipswich have tried to do. They brought in a lot of players, or the manager has to be prepared to do something different. Southampton did neither, and they've got a calamity on their hands.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you've made. And I think actually one of the reasons that Russell was headhunted in the first place was because of that playing style. So if you're appointing a manager because of his philosophy, how can you then ask him to tear it up and start again just a few games into the season? But you mentioned the signings. I think Aaron Ramsdale, who obviously was a television pundit tonight because he wasn't fit to play. I think he's Premier League quality. But again, you look at the rest of the players they brought in the summer. Sugawara did okay at the start of the season. He was on the bench today. Adam Lallana obviously is a club legend, but clearly doesn't have the legs to play week in, week out in the Premier League anymore. Same can be said of Ryan Fraser. Cameron Archer, I think, is somebody who's going to get a lot of goals in the Championship, but will that translate to the Premier League? All of those players are on the bench today, so that doesn't say much for their summer recruitment. And then you've got players like Paul Onuachu, doesn't suit Russell Martin's style at all. He's 6'7". He's a big target man striker. Clearly, Russell likes to play with the ball on the floor. They paid a lot of money for him when they were in the Premier League first time round. So too Kamaldeen Sulemana, who we've barely seen. He started the game tonight. So I think the recruitment has been wrong for a long time now. And therefore, whichever manager comes in, they're going to have to work with a squad that, for me, is not fit for purpose in the Premier League. And I think it'll be fascinating to see where they turn. We've seen it with Wolverhampton Wanderers. It looks like Vito Pereira is going in there untried in the Premier League because managers like Graham Potter and David Moyes don't want the job. And I think Southampton could encounter similar problems. Somebody's just suggested to me that maybe Lallana could be the sort of honeymoon appointment, but I think he's probably a bit too shrewd, Adam Lallana, although I believe he wants to be a manager one day to take this job.
Incredible gamble to take. That would be an incredible gamble. With all due respect to Adam, who, as you say, is a legend at the club, Andy.
Yeah, there are a lot of really good unemployed coaches out there at the moment, Alex. Who do you sense would be a good choice? Where would you like to see them go?
Well, Southampton fans want Graham Potter because he played for the club. He was actually part of that game against Manchester United when United changed their kit at half-time. But he's turned down so many jobs. He's not going to take that one, with all due respect. There are some good managers in the Championship. Carlos Corberán, who I believe Wolverhampton Wanderers looked at, I think will be a Premier League manager one day. Michael Carrick is going great guns at Middlesbrough, but is he really going to swap them to take this job? Steve Cooper, I think, could be an interesting candidate because I get the impression he's keen to get back to work as soon as possible, but doesn't really fit with the Southampton model, the way the owners, the Sport Republic, want to play. So I don't think there is an obvious candidate at this stage, and whoever comes in, they're going to have a relegation on their CV. Southampton are not savable, in my opinion, which is why I'd have probably stuck with Russell Martin. He's taken them out of the Championship once before. Who better to do it again? But again, when the fans turn, there were banners at St Mary's tonight, more than one banner asking for his head. It's difficult for the manager to turn that around. But do the owners need to be braver in that situation? Do they need to stick by their man and stick by their principles?
Listen, Alex, thank you very, very much indeed.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.